And I came up with the concept for him was to rewire, repackage, and repurpose. It makes your age your superpower. That's kind of how I look at it. And rather than it being against them, by repositioning themselves and having that pattern recognition, all of a sudden, they're really, really valuable.
Hello there and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske here. I hope you're doing wonderfully well. Now on today's show, I have the pleasure of welcoming author, podcaster and founder of Executive Nomad, Mr. Jamie Sylvian. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Hey Rick, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, look, it's very, very exciting to have you here. Now, you and I are going to be talking about how professionals over 50 can turn decades of corporate expertise into a location-independent advisory business that's free from titles, borders, and a life working for a single employer, which sounds very, very exciting. But before we jump into the core of the call today, Jamie, where are you calling in from?
I'm in Bulgaria right now. So this is where I call home. I'm actually from I'm Irish, Rick, but I was brought up in London. But I've been on traveling, living the kind of the executive nomad or the nomad stuff before I became an executive for a long time. But this time of year in Bulgaria is I think is the most beautiful place in Europe to be as spring comes around from winter. It's
Absolutely.
just so colourful. And I live in a ski resort. So it's busy season, lots going on and all that good stuff. So I've just come back from a 5-week stint in Malta, which was sort of got me over the hump of the real cold winter. And before that, I was in Greece. And next week, I'll be back in Greece and then back in Spain in about a month's time.
Wow.
So I'm on the road a lot.
I bet you are. Is it actually called Sofia where you're calling in from?
No, it's Bansko. Bansko is the ski resort. Sofia is our capital, which is about a 2-hour schlep down the mountain from here.
Learning on the go. But tell me, I'd love to learn a little bit about you before we jump into the core of the call. What's your thing? What do you like doing when you do stay in one place for a certain amount of time? Do you socialize? Do you get out and about?
I do, and I've got one of the benefits I have is when I'm traveling around, I do have bases. I go to Malta a lot, I go to Cyprus a lot, and I just have friends that I rock up and I just let them know I'm in town, and so we do. I have a great social life here in Bulgaria. We've got skiing, and once the snow has gone, we've got the biking. It's a national park, so there's a lot of off-road biking going on here, which I really enjoy. And I love city hopping. I'll just pop off for a weekend if I'm in town and pop off at, as you mentioned, Sofia. I really like that as a city because it's got so much history, so much culture.
You seem to me to love, the downtime away from, working, quote unquote, working. What's the things that you enjoy the most? Are you a cyclist? What's your thing?
Yeah, no, I do. I was a very, very keen skier for many years, Rick, and then I had a bit of a smash, so I decided that I was done with that.
Yeah.
So I focused mainly on the bikes. I really look forward to getting out there, sort of towards the early weeks of March. When the snow breaks and the lower levels start to thaw. That's when everybody gets out on the mountain bikes, which I really enjoy.
I tell you one thing, I've seen some images of Sofia and the surrounding areas, and it is such a beautiful, looks like a very old environment with some really amazing cultural buildings.
Yeah, it's astonishing, and it's missed. A lot of people. It's only started, Rick, in the last 3 or 4 years, really since COVID, to become a place that people actually want to go. I first came here 20 years ago when where I live now, which is a major ski resort in Europe, was still a village. They were just putting up the gondola, and the chairlifts and so on.
Well, that's a very interesting comment that you made about COVID, because it seems to be obviously globally impacting a lot of people. How was that space of time for you personally?
I didn't mind it. There was a great pivot that happened. I think it's the most important thing that happened was a real pivot. Is because back before that, for about 4 or 5 years, Rick, I was popping back I'd be based here in Bulgaria, but for a week to 10 days every month, I was in London, in central London, I was running a communication strategy at the time, a strategy business. And when COVID came and I couldn't go, you're in a situation you think, oh, I've got to make changes. I've still got clients. And I just thought, well, I do so much work on Zoom as it was at the time I was working on. I thought I'll just do all of that. So I just instead of investing into plane tickets and hotels, I just invested into a studio environment where I can have good audio and so on. and I never went back. I haven't been in a client's office since then.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me, I know that you seem to me to be always on the go. Do you give yourself downtime? Is that important for you to have a rest occasionally?
Yeah. So the way I don't do holidays as such. What I do is a great example, Rick, is that as I said, I've been in Malta for 5 weeks. I was staying in a place called Gezira, which is opposite Valletta, which is the old part that's in all the old movies. I tend to work. I get up early. I get my work done for the day, and then I go off and have an adventure somewhere. So I'm usually done by my 2 p.m. wherever I am, and that's when I go out and explore what Malta's got to offer and all the ruins, and it's got such great history, and I do that pretty much wherever I am. So I kind of mix work and work and play, if you like.
So as the executive nomad, you must obviously have had an extensive experience in the corporate environment at some point in time. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, your professional background.
Sure. So yeah, I worked in London, and I worked in the city in London for many years. I was in marketing primarily, but I got into the corporate world or into the executive world because I became the founder of a company that is now called uswitch.com, which is a huge company in London. It's a household name. They have advertising everywhere. You switch your energy supplier and your telephone supplier and such. And I was a joint founder of that, actually with a member of the royal family in the UK. And that kind of put me into boardroom meetings and so on, which I enjoyed the buzz, but I didn't like I felt like I was caged. So I sort of started to step aside and just be there when I was needed. And that's kind of led me into consulting into corporates. So I've done a lot of corporate work. I've worked in Gibraltar in the gaming industry. Billion-dollar companies. BetVictor was a client of mine, where I would mentor their up-and-coming staff, their high-level managers, into how communications work across online businesses and across global and cultural differences. I've worked in the US with publishing companies. I actually worked in communications on publishing or helping publishers to launch new sales letters. So I like the corporate world. I come from the corporate world. I had my one and only real job was with British Telecom in the UK, which was very much low level. So I wasn't at the corporate world, but I was working directly with the board. Though I wasn't sitting there as a board member, I was very, very open to it. And one of the things I saw that it didn't make any impact on me at the time, Rick, I was too young, but was how older executives didn't look like they were enjoying their job anymore. It really struck me. They have so much responsibility and so many people calling on their time that it was just not something that I felt that was right for me. Although I did enjoy the buzz and I liked the challenge of building things out in a business environment, I just decided that going in and going out of businesses was much better for me. And that's when I started the nomad lifestyle. But that's not, I didn't give it a badge. I didn't give it a name. And, Executive Nomad didn't exist at that time. That's just what I started to do. So I didn't really, as I said, I didn't set out to be an executive nomad. I just set out not to be stuck in a boardroom in an office all the time.
Yeah, wow, great feedback. Thank you so very much. Now, I wonder, with all these things you've talked about, the British Gas and the royal family to Gibraltar Gaming and all these other giants that you've worked with. How does that opportunity come about, given that you're borderless and moving around? How do you secure clients like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it used to be tricky. It's not tricky anymore. So the way to do it is, or the way I did it was, if you approach a board, or a high-level manager or somebody that you're interested in working with, and they see that you're borderless. It used to be that they didn't like working with you if you weren't, in London, if they were a London-based company or New York and so on. That became less important about 10 years ago, and it became completely irrelevant when COVID hit. I used to always be asked on Zoom calls, where are you calling in from? And very often I say, well, next time you're in London, come and sit down with me. Honestly, since COVID, nobody even asks anymore, and it's good because it doesn't make any difference. What I'm being paid for is my experience, is my pattern recognition. When I'm talking to a board member, I can say, I've seen that problem before in this other project that I work. I don't need to be sitting in a boardroom to do that. So what I do have, though, in answer to the question, is I do have a London virtual office address, right, in City Road in London. So at first glance, I also have a UK phone number. So if a UK client wants to call me, they call me on a London number. I have the same setup for the US, where I have clients, and for Canada, where I have clients. So I appear local wherever my potential client would be. But actually, the reality is, once I have the discussion with them and they understand how I work, it never becomes a question. It doesn't matter anymore.
You touched on a word or a phrase, pattern recognition. That sort of strikes a bell with me, because I think about your Executive Nomad framework. I'm wondering if you can talk about that and, this pattern recognition, how that all sort of meshes in together.
Sure. Well, give me a quick background on how it came about, the actual Executive Nomad brand. So I was down in Greece. I'm still working in comms, and I was sitting in a cafe in Neomamaris in Greece. And I was just on the phone doing what I do, notepad in front of me, having a chat. I was working on the communications side of an energy deal, like a mergers and acquisitions deal. Somebody was buying a company. Yeah. And I was having a conversation. I didn't take much notice of the guy sitting at a table with his wife very near me. But when I finished the call, he just said to me, "You look busy, or you sound busy." And we got talking. Turns out he was an English guy. He was 54. He'd been laid off from his company they'd been with for 20 years. They'd been bought out, and that's what pricked up his ears. I was talking about mergers and acquisitions. So So we got talking, and he said, I've got money. He got a great payoff. He'd been in the game a long time. He said, but I don't know what to do next. And by the time we'd had probably 2 glasses of wine, maybe 3 each, we'd come up with a strategy. And I said to him, what you have is less valuable in a corporate role, going back to the job, because you're going to find it hard because of ageism, because of the way corporations work. They look for younger people. I said, but it's so valuable that you can take those experiences that you've got. All you need to do is rewire them into something that becomes an actual offer, becomes a thing. And so we sat down, as I said, for a few hours, and I talked about the whole process with him. And I came up with the concept for him was to rewire, repackage, and repurpose, exactly what he'd been doing for the last 25 years. Rewire is where you take your business wins, losses, and lessons, your career, your history, and you pick out from there things that the experiences that you've had. And it may be quite difficult to do for some corporate people because they've never had to, because the big wins they've had in their career were part of a much bigger picture. A merger and an acquisition has 50 different moving parts a minute. So I talked to him about actually finding things. He was from the logistics space, and we pulled out some of his wins. And I said, right, you need to rewire those into something that you can actually create a business and offer it into the logistics space. And how you do that is you rewire it, you repackage it, and you actually give it a name. So he became the logistics site guy. So, and the reason you have, if you say I'm a consultant, well, there's a billion consultants, Rick. If you say I'm the logistics site guy, this is what I do, then you now have a very, very specific service that you can offer. After you've repackaged it and given it a name, and you're pushing it out there, then you repurpose it into how does exactly that process you work with a new wrapper. So he knows how it works in logistics. How does it work in the healthcare? Because they have mergers and acquisitions challenges. They have different things going on, but they're just the same problem with a different wrapper on. So if to reverse engineer that, Rick, I say, look, just work out what you've got, and then you just need to give it a new name. The actual work you do is going to be more or less the same, but it needs to be positioned properly for the sectors that you work in. Yes. Once you've got that, it doesn't matter if I can work in communications, and I have, as I said, in Gibraltar. The service I offer from here to a client in Gibraltar is exactly the same as if I'm talking to somebody in Australia. It's exactly the same service. Doesn't matter. No, absolutely. And that's so when I kind of sat down for a few days with him, and as I said, we shared a few bottles of wine, I'd come out, I walked away, and I said to my wife, I said, there is actually, I've never really thought about it, but the work I do I've always there's a lot of digital nomads around. That's such a thing these days. But
Isn't
I've
it?
kind of always, I've been that for my whole career. And I said, actually, there must be a lot of people like this guy, Peter.
Yep.
And it turns out there's loads. It turns out there are so many people who are at a transition point, a crossroads in their life, and they've come from the corporate world. It's a very different world culturally than the entrepreneurial world. But that experience, that pattern recognition that they've got to be able to say, I saw this in 20 years ago or 5 years ago in the mergers and acquisitions world. It actually fits really, really well into this business sale that you're doing in healthcare.
Yes.
So he's just recognizing stuff. He says, I've seen that before. And the value, I think, Rick, is that younger people, the people that you're competing with in the job world, they can't have that pattern recognition because they haven't been through it before.
You simply cannot buy experience, can you?
Exactly that. And it makes your age your superpower. That's kind of how I look at it. And rather than it being, people find it in the corporate world, it's against them. By repositioning themselves and having that pattern recognition, all of a sudden, they're really, really valuable.
Can I ask? You must see so many different people, Jamie, who have almost a, for lack of better ways to call it, a depression of sorts, given that they're nearing the latter side of their corporate environment. That's all they've ever been used to. They've had authority, responsibility, and all these things. Once you have a conversation with them, you find that they're renewed and have a new zest for life that goes along with this new change?
Yeah, that comes from, there's two angles. The first thing is from my experience, Rick, what it is relevance. It's people who are coming out and they've had the badge, they've had the office, they spent the day, people knocking on their door, asking them, can I do this? What do you think? They've had all of this stuff. And all of a sudden they don't have that. Their inbox is empty. The phone's not ringing. What happens is they lose relevance. They think, now who am I? Now that I'm not the director, now that I'm not the upper manager, no, I'm not that thing. And so they kind of feel lost because they've never been in a position where they say, right, like an entrepreneurial position where you're always hustling, you're always trying to work out what happens next. When you're in the corporate world, if you need advertising done, you ask Dave down the corridor. You needed something in accounting, you ask Mary upstairs. This is a very different world, and they get lost. So when I sit down when we go through I have a thing called the Clarity app that I designed, which helps people. They just tap in what their career wins, losses, and experiences are. It just says, why not do this? And that I programmed, used an AI expert. It wasn't me for sure. But we worked out how I do it, how I would be sitting down saying to you, Rick, what's your career experience? Well, this is what you could do. Once people see and there is clarity in their head to go, oh, right, that thing that I did after that sale of the business, after we went global with the corporate brand or whatever it is that they did, they see that value, then that sparks. That recreates relevance because they see how they can be relevant, not to just, behind the corporate shield that they've been for 20 years, but much more, but globally. They can actually speak to people about that in Australia, in London, in New York, in Washington. And that brings back relevance and that brings back confidence. And that's a really exciting thing.
Do you think that because of geographic borders, somebody's been used to operating out of the UK or the States or Australia, that they have this mindset that they need to break through, that local regulations and ways and cultures must be different across the sea, therefore I can't operate in that way? Do you find that?
Yeah, definitely. And to me, I never even knew that was a problem until I really started this. Because to me, because I've always traveled, I love hitting new cultures, trying to work it all out. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong, obviously. But actually, I say to them, look, you have to just be aware of it and also be open. When I'm talking to somebody, dealing with Americans is very different to me than dealing with the British. As I say, we speak the same language, but they're so different. And I had to learn some stuff about dealing with Americans that I wasn't used to because I was used to dealing with at the time with the British. So I say be open to it. Be open to working borderless. Be open to talking to people, but also be transparent. If you don't understand, just ask.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on AI earlier, and I'd love to know your take on this because you can't ignore it. It's there. It's omnipresent almost. And has this made life easier? I'm excited about it personally.
Yeah, me too. I think I think it's fascinating. I think there's a challenge for older people to get over, because it's like any new technology, that it's not as scary. You can read all sorts of stuff in the media. To me, it's going to be really, really helpful, because what I believe it will do, instead of taking over a job at this level, at executive level, instead of taking over a job, it will just make your job so much easier. Because you imagine the research that you have had to do not that long ago, Rick. You're going to work with a company in Singapore, you've got to advise them on something or other. Now you can research that, you can prepare stuff in their language, you can ask ChatGPT about the culture of Singapore when you're presenting your presentations. And so you deliver something that is immediately relevant to your client, rather than sort of having to tiptoe your way around it. And it can be done in days, not weeks.
Yes.
And much more valuable than that is the money side of things. I could now do the stuff that used to take me 2 weeks in a communications deal, I could probably do in 3 hours. But I don't charge by the hour. I charge by the
result,
by the result and the project that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So a big advantage to using AI, and just don't be afraid of it. I hear that question so much. Are any of us going to have a job? It goes back to that pattern recognition, Rick. You know, because you've got the experience, what needs to happen. AI can't do that. It can only look back on stuff that's already online.
It's just a tool, isn't it? Look, you touched on this earlier about, I guess, shifting from the mindset of a long-term employee, even at the executive level. You're essentially still reporting to somebody else, to this entrepreneurial mindset. Do you find that that's successful, or do you find that that's one of the biggest struggles? If not, what is the biggest struggle from going from one environment to the other that you've seen?
So a great question. So what happens is you start to work with your peers, not immediately, because you still have that corporate overhang.
Yeah.
You're still in that thing where you're seeing structure because that's what you're used to. But ultimately what happens is you start working and talking with peers. So for example, you're pitching for a deal. We'll use Peter as the example. I always use him because he was my first. When he's doing his outreach, when he's got his positioning locked in and he's got the whole business and he's got his name and he knows exactly what he's doing, he's reaching out to people as he was a COO in the company. He's reaching out to COOs in companies. He's immediately a peer. He immediately has credibility. So when he goes into a business, he's working with the COO of the business or the CTO or whatever level he's working at. There is a respect that comes from the other side. But what he'll find, or what all consultants find, is that the value is that you can kind of step aside and you're not involved in corporate politics. It does take a while to get used to this, I have to say, because I have this conversation a lot. But you're not involved in politics. You're not involved in the minutiae of a corporation. You're there to do a job. You have the credibility because you've proven it.
Yeah.
You have the strategic positioning to mean that you're a peer and you should be treated as such. But then you can step aside. To me, that was really the thing I used to love about doing it. You go in and you get knee deep in all of this stuff. When it's done, you step aside. You step back and you say, all right, off you go, and then go and have a break somewhere. So it does take getting used to from corporation to the consulting, coaching, mentoring perspective. But once you get there, it's much more relaxing because you're not even having to stay there and see all the work done and go through the stress of KPIs and that. You're saying, this is what to do, guys. Do it, and then come back.
You must have such a wealth of knowledge and experience and skill, Jamie. I'd love to know, what do you think your main strength is from a satellite perspective? If you're looking down on yourself, what would one thing be that would stick out?
I'm an absolute pirate when it comes to trying new things. so I have a real curiosity, and that's what really led me into, it led me into living the lifestyle of the executive nomad before I even knew that's what I was going to call it. Yeah, exactly. And then it led me into when I had that conversation with Peter and started to sort of go onto LinkedIn and see how this thing might work. I was so curious about it. I was so curious about was there a market from a business perspective, of course, but also feeding into people's problems. I didn't know ageism was a thing because it's never been it's never affected me because I've never looked for a job.
Yeah.
And then after I got that, once I'd started to build out Executive Nomad as an idea, as a brand, I couldn't wait to get it started. But I also knew that there was something global about it, something in my mind that this is not just Jamie helping the odd fella to build a business. I thought, no, do you know what? If I get this right, then Executive Nomad is not a brand name to me, and this is my plan. It's not a brand name. It's an actual movement. I want you to be sitting in Australia one day, and some fella saying to you, "Yeah, I'm going to lose my job when there's a merger," and you say, "Well, why don't you become an executive?"
I know who to send them to. That's for sure.
that's what I'm after. And quick side story is I was so disappointed. I bought executivenomad.co.uk, I think was my first one. And I had this lovely idea of making it a global thing and having other people to do the coaching that I do and so on. But I didn't own .com. And you have to own .com if you want to if you want to be a brand. You want to dominate the market. And in I think it was June of last year, I was in the middle of writing the book or getting the book organized to start writing. And so a broker called me out of the blue and said, "Are you interested in buying a .com?" And I said,
"Well,
yeah, maybe. Yeah. And I was thinking, what on earth is that? What on earth is that going to cost? I said, well, yeah, let me know. And anyway, a month later, I owned it, and that meant you go to .co.uk, .us, .New Zealand, I think we've got to Australia now as well. I think it's ongoing. We own the brand. The brand is there.
That's brilliant. I love that brand. It's such a great brand.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So in answer to the question, I've this curiosity. I've said, I don't mind. I'm not in it for the money. I mean, yes, of course I am. Everyone's
that's a side effect, isn't it?
That's not the point. The point is how cool it would be, as I said, for you to be sitting with somebody in a bar or in a cafe one day and saying you should become an executive nomad.
Yes.
That to me is great. That to me is what I'm trying to get.
It's what it's all about. Look, I know, having worked with executives for a long time myself and interviewed almost 600-700 of them now over the years, what I've found is that they're very confident individuals. Now, but moving from, one corporate known environment to an unknown entrepreneurial environment, what are your relationships like with these ex-executives? Do you have long-term ongoing relationships with them? How does the work, deliver itself for you? How do you know when you've achieved something with someone?
Yeah, another good question. Yeah, all right. So just in answer to the first bit, they are very confident until they're not. That's what I found. So what that means is they were so confident because they spent 20 years building up, and all of a sudden that's all taken away. That's very, very disorienting for them. But it's only disorienting until they get the hang of stuff, and then the confidence and as I said earlier about relevance. When all of that comes back, they're back on track. But there is that sort of 3-month period of they are a little bit lost. But that they've got to that point in life in their career because they're smart, because they work hard, because they do what needed to do to get to that point. So they just need guidance. That's kind of the point. Now, in answer to your question in terms of the relationships, yes, the relationships are ongoing, but until I got the book sorted out and I got this, Executive Nomad as a brand really positioned, it wasn't. I would work with people on a consulting basis, and then they'd be gone. They'd bring me up and talk to me, and that'd be it. And as I started now with Executive Nomad as a brand, Rick, as soon as they've gone through the coaching, the training with me, and they've got an actual business, they're still a part of the Executive Nomad ecosystem. So we help them to position themselves with a book, an actual book that they can send out to potential clients. It's way better than any business card you can imagine. And that's published through the Executive Nomad imprint. So they're actually still part of the Executive Nomad brand. And they're using that as their platform for credibility, for ongoing credibility. And they'll also be able to, this isn't ready yet, but it's there, but it's just not quite, in terms of testing. They can build out their positioning because we're consistently reaching out into the HR world, finding out what they need. If they need somebody who's a comms expert, it would come to me. It would come to my desk. If they need somebody who's in logistics at all, or management within the logistics space, it goes to somebody else. So we're building out a network that we will actually push work to people, push contracts to people. and that came from the idea is that, well, like, if I can do comms, if that was my thing, but you're a copywriter, you're a sales writer, then I would rather talk to you as part of the Executive Nomad network than I would go and searching for somebody on LinkedIn. So that ecosystem is what we're going to build out, and that we can do because we will be a global brand.
See, that's what I'm thinking about next. Is what sort of a timeline are we talking about? 5, 10 years? What are you looking at?
3 to 5 will get us to a position where it's a well-known brand, it's a well-known business. In terms of getting for you to tell your mate down the pub to become an executive nomad, it's probably a bit longer, but I'm prepared to wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, there'd be lots of executives that are listening to this. Hopefully they're listening to the show. I'm pretty sure they are. What's one bit of advice you'd give somebody that was burnt out and they were thinking, this sounds like something I can do? What's the first thing they would do?
Yeah, take a breather is the first thing. That's my biggest advice.
A holiday per se?
If that's what whatever it means to take a breather for you. As I say, for me, I'll jump on a plane, I'll go off to a city, I'll go off to a coast or whatever when I need a breather. But take some time for yourself, because that will give you the clarity. Once you've had a few days or a week or whatever it is, and you've sort of calmed down, and all of the stress from either losing your job or being burnt out, whatever the reasons why you just calm down a bit, then you need clarity.
Yeah.
Clarity is all about, and I've got the app on the website, executivenomad.com. Go and have a play with the app. Have a go of it and see. Just type in your wins, losses, and lessons, and it'll tell you. It'll give you some ideas. Now, these may not what you'll end up doing, but at least it starts to gives you possibilities. If that works for you, then you can either just go ahead and do that, build that out. If you need further advice, then you can always book in a one-to-one with me, which is an hour. And we'll just talk through. We'll have this kind of a conversation in this kind of environment, where I will use my pattern recognition to say, oh, this is so similar to what you're just saying about this. What about that as an example? I can pick out. I was always able to do that, Rick. Now I just use AI to make it much easier for me to do it. Yeah. And then they can decide, again, they can go off and do it on their own, or they can decide that they want some further engagement with me and some active involvement with the Executive Nomad brand. And that's pretty much it.
That's it. The one thing that I hear here is that where one door closes, another one opens. It would be such a great subscript to Executive Nomad. And if anybody's listening to this, we'll certainly be sharing the details of how to reach out to Jamie and look at all of his wonderful work. But tell us, Jamie, about your books.
So I have 2 books. The first one is really, it's just how I see. It's a statement. It's setting out what Executive Nomad is to me as a brand. And as I said, I don't want to be just thought of as a business. I want this to be a thing. Yeah. And that really just sets that out. So it's a very, very short book, and it just explains the rise of the Executive Nomad. It's the way that work is changing. It explains it from my perspective. You no longer need to be that in that office, but then you'll get to the point where you think, well, I love that idea. Now what do I do? And that's what the operating system is all about. It takes you step by step through rewiring, repackaging, repurposing. It gives you a bit of a history about where I came from in terms of the nomadic lifestyle. On my bookshelf back there, Rick, is books from 1991 that were called Perpetual Traveler. And that was where the whole concept of the digital nomads, which is a huge global movement, that's where that started. There's nothing in those books that you could use now. It'll all be highly illegal, I'm sure. But to me, back then when I was a youngster, that's what set me on this path of saying I can have a different life than all my peers were going through. College, university, off to the corporations, and the big companies. I just wanted something different, and
that's going to happen for sure.
It is definitely going to happen, and it's happening so much. And this, as I said, this environment, there's nothing that I can't do. If you need a file in Australia, the other side of the world for me, you've got it in what?
It's crazy, and it makes me think about how blessed I have to say we are to live in an age where we can have relationships without borders like this. And you've hit the nail on the proverbial head when it comes to being able to stay connected no matter where you are. But it makes me also think about your ongoing, I guess, I don't like the word social media exposure, but your ongoing exposure. I know that you at least have started podcasts. Is that right?
Yeah. So actually, the first bunch come today. Actually, I've been learning the ropes and buying all the toys. So yeah, I've got Executive Nomad. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on YouTube, and we'll be on we're on Deezer as well, which is an American one. And that will be where I'm having these kind of conversations with executives as they make that transition, just so people can learn from each other, with HR managers, so we can learn what HR are looking for when they're reaching out to find themselves a consultant. So yeah, I hope it's going to be a home for a learning place for people to come and say, actually, I could do that.
Absolutely. Again, anybody who's on the call, we're just about to share the links back to Jamie and all of his wonderful work. But before we do that, you offer group studio sessions and one-to-one coaching. Tell us a little bit about that, and how would somebody know whether or not they're qualified before reaching out, and when they are going to reach out, where they're going to find you?
Well, everything, my entire ecosystem is at executivenomad.com.
Right.
Everything you need is there.
Yep.
There is the Clarity app, which I mentioned, where you can just get an idea, because it may not be for you, and it costs you nothing to find that out, and that's a value in and of itself, right? But if you start to think about, once you've gone through the Clarity app, you start to think about how you could make this transition. And that doesn't matter if you're burnt out or you've been laid off. It doesn't matter, whatever the reasons are. The next step is to get clarity about your next step in your career. And remember, for a lot of people, this is the last stage of the career. People could do this for the next 5, 10, 15 years or whatever, but it's the last stage. They're not going back into the corporate world anymore. Then they'll decide if they want to have a conversation with me. I have a 20-minute conversation, just book it in, and it's by phone, so I don't have to sit in front of the cameras all day. But it's just a chat. There's no sale. I don't do salesy stuff. There's no sales environment.
They're self-selecting, aren't they? Really?
Absolutely, they are. And this is intentional. This is very much by design, Rick.
Yeah.
Once they've gone through that 20 minutes, then they say, this is actually worth that one-to-one conversation with Jamie, where we focus, where I'll ask very, very specific questions, and we're drawing out the value, and I'm saying, what about what you've just said, in exactly the same sort of interview that we're doing now? What about what you've just said? Let's focus on that. By the end of that hour, they've got a clear idea of what direction they can go in. Doesn't mean they'll end up there. They may have other ideas as they come along, and I hope they do. But the purpose is to get that absolute clarity, and then they can make the decision. So that's a paid for hour session, just them and me, just one-to-one, as I said.
Yep.
And then decide if they want a group cohort, if they want to help me, my help in really, really building this thing out. They can have a fully branded consulting business online, ready to go within 30 days of being trained by me. Doesn't mean they've got clients. That's going to take a bit more. Yeah, but it's first step. They've got something that they send clients to. And the idea is that I would interview them on the podcast. And so we would, or one of our other podcasts, or 2 different podcasts, is I'd talk to them about their offer. Can you imagine the value for a consultant, a new consultant to the space, who can specifically speak about the challenges in logistics with the changes in government structure? A very, very specific thing. He doesn't have to sell that anymore. He just says to other people in that space, other COOs or CTOs or whatever he is, Rick, he says, go and have a listen to my podcast.
Have a listen to this.
He's already sold.
Yes.
Yeah, he's already sold his value before they ever get on the phone. So for executives coming out saying, I hate salesy stuff and I'm really not a salesman, so on, good, you're not a salesman. That this is what does that credibility in that sales. When they get on the phone for a real life conversation, they already know what he can do, what she can do. So
this is grassroots.
So that's the value.
We're planting seeds and giving people renewed vigor and career direction thanks to you. And anybody who's on today's call, you want to reach out, Executive Nomad is certainly a place to go and do that. No matter where you find this interview, you're going to find those links, and it's going to be very, very quick and easy for you to reach out to Jamie. With all that being said, Jamie, thank you so very much for this wonderful, insightful call. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
It was my pleasure, Ed.